I want to start with the Jimmy Dore show today. You know, deep thinkers over there, very smart people over at the Jimmy Dore show, intellectuals, philosophers, a true Aristotle program over there. Aristotle, Plato, they probably would have listened to Jimmy Dore. Almost certainly. Well, anyway, the Jimmy Dore program has released a segment called "Thousands of Ukrainian Troops Surrender to Russia" with an exclamation point. And it's only about 5 minutes. We're gonna watch it quick. Now, this wasn't hosted by Jimmy, but it is his show. So ultimately, he is responsible for what is reported on his show. If he isn't going through what segments are being covered and saying, wait a second, let's fact check this or fact check that, that's him being irresponsible. So I do believe, and I think this is fair, that I can hold him to account for what is published on his program, even if he is not the host because he's lazy or he has to go to a wedding or for whatever reason he is not the host on this program. Let's watch the segment and let's talk about their huge claims about Ukrainian troops surrendering en masse.
Here's something that we have to point out too as well, because while our Congress is over there fighting to give more money to Ukraine in their money laundering scheme, we're seeing this all over the place.
Now, I didn't even want to talk about, I forgot about this, but let me just quickly say, when people say money laundering, do they mean money laundering, or are they just saying, we have given money to Ukraine, therefore it's money laundering, because lots of money going to Ukraine is shady, and I've heard Ukraine is corrupt, so money laundering is probably going on. There's been no evidence ever provided that money laundering is happening with U.S. aid. I don't even, is he saying that it was like aid in the form of humanitarian assistance, which I think there still hasn't been evidence of money laundering through humanitarian aid, but I guess that would be potentially easier. Would it be through our tanks and the shells, which would be a lot harder? I don't know how you're going to money launder the shells or what evidence there is of that. There's none, but he just kind of throws that out there and then continues with the segment and provides no evidence for the claim. I think for a lot of people who watch the Jimmy Dore show, a lot of, I would call them conspiracy theorists. I think they would probably reject that claim, saying, another establishment chill, calling us conspiracy theorists. But for people who are more conspiratorially minded, people who I think are reflectively anti-establishment, so they're just going to take whatever the position that is not the quote-unquote establishment position is, I think that they just hear money is going to country. They have vaguely heard rumors of Ukraine being corrupt, and we are going to cover stories about American concerns around corruption in Ukraine later. And then they put those two things together, and they've just come to the conclusion that it's a money laundering scheme. They haven't really gone through the process of finding any financial documents or any evidence or proof that American weapons are disappearing, or proof that British weapons or any of the weapons have been sent from Poland or Denmark or Sweden or Finland or any of these countries. They don't have any evidence of it. They just hear a large amount of money goes to Ukraine, probably money laundering. That's it. There doesn't really need to be a follow-up to that, or at least the show isn't going to care about following up.
This is from TFI Global. 17,000 troops gone. 10,000 concedes Ukrainian surrender stats revealed. And this has been happening all over the place. Let me go here. So Ukrainian troops are surrendering en masse. In recent weeks, a significant number of Ukrainian troops have surrendered to the Russian military, utilizing a dedicated radio frequency established by the Russian armed forces known as Volga, with a call sign of 149.200. So in other words, what they're doing, Misha, is they're leaving their radio frequency set to this dial if you want to sit there and you want to surrender, because the Russians know. The Russians see these videos of the Ukrainians going out there, grabbing these kids or grabbing these adults or grabbing these
kids?
Ukrainian citizens and throwing them to the front line.
What is he? Wait. What? Grabbing these kids? Who is he talking about? Grabbing these kids? Okay, I'm going to talk about the main claim here and what the source for this claim is in a second. But when he just threw that out. Like grabbing these kids or these adults or these old men. Kids? Which kids? What evidence is there of 12-year-old? Like, when I think of a kid, right? Like, I could imagine a story where somebody's 17 months old and not 17 months old. No. 17 years old and maybe 8 months. And because I remember my grandfather signed up for Vietnam when he was 17, and he was deployed when he was 17 illegally because he volunteered. And I know that things like that can happen just from my own family's personal experience. But I can think of maybe like a story like that happening. I haven't seen anything like that. But he threw out the word kid, and then he threw out the word adult. And I thought maybe when he said kid, somebody's referring to somebody who's 18, 19, 20, because I hear a lot of the older veterans refer to the younger soldiers as kids. But he said a kid and then adult, which is like a differentiation. He's like differentiating between these two things. Like they're deploying the infants, they're deploying the children. Is he just throwing that out, just hoping it sticks? Like maybe somebody has an instance of this happening? But whatever, just threw that out there. No concern for, checking if that's true or not whatsoever. For a lot of these alt media shows, they love to rail against all the times mainstream media has gotten something wrong, or the lies of the mainstream press and how they're manufacturing consent. But then they make their own news shows. They have the opportunity to do their own program, and they can run it any way they want, which is a beautiful thing about alt media. It's why I like some alt media platforms, is because you don't have to make a show around advertisers. You don't need to make a show around ad breaks. You can make a show around whatever you want. And that's why I've chosen to do my show this way, because I don't have to put in Tampax commercials. But that also means you can choose to dedicate as much time as you want to fact checking, to doing research, to all these things. And they've just chosen to do none of that. Anyway, let's continue.
They don't want to fight anymore. They know what's going on, and they're compassionate about it. People are saying, why hasn't Russia won this war yet? Because they don't want to wipe it off the face of the planet, Ukraine. They look at these people as their brothers and sisters, and they're trying their best to just eventually win the war without destroying the infrastructure of Ukraine. And it's discussing what the United States are doing. We haven't lost one American life, but the Ukrainian lives, that's okay.
Man, this is okay. So there's a lot to cover here, and we're gonna I don't know if I want to, I'll just drop it now because he's saying so much nonsense that I feel like I have to drop it now. So if you read this, let's just read this one paragraph, right? In recent weeks, a significant number of Ukrainian troops have surrendered to the Russian military, utilizing a dedicated radio frequency established by the Russian armed forces, known as Volga, with a call sign 149200. I read that and immediately alarm bells started going off in my head, because I'm thinking Russian armed forces call sign. Okay, so who would be the source for this information? Is it an independent NGO? Is it a independent freelance journalist? Is it some news outlet? What is the source for this? And so I did digging. I found the article, the TFI Global article, and I found the links that they used to source their information for this article. And the source was Russian state media. It was Russia Today. They were the source of it, and they were citing TASS, other Russian state media platform. So it's Russian state media. So we have an article citing Russian state media, which then cites as their source a separate Russian state media platform, which provided no photographs, no videos, no documents, nothing. What happened is that the Russian military came to the Russian state media apparatus, or the Russian state media apparatus just made this up on their own. Who knows? With Russia Today, it could be either or. If anybody remembers the Putin burger story from back in the day, knows that they just make up nonsense sometimes. And they just reported this with no evidence whatsoever. This is directly from the Russian government's mouth. This is straight from the Russian government. Russia Today is directly funded by the Russian government, and it gets its narratives directly from the Russian government. Everyone knows, who's been covering Russia for any period of time, that Russian state media gets its directives for what it should cover and what it shouldn't cover from the Russian government. That's why during the big crisis when Wagner was marching, doing its thunder run on Moscow, all of the Russian state media programs were just cutting to commercial again and again and again and playing jazz music and anything they could to distract from the actual news, because they didn't get a directive from the Russian government on how they were supposed to talk about Wagner marching on the Capitol. That was until Putin came out, made his speech. Then they started to come out and start condemning Wagner and starting to come out with statements. So what just happened is Jimmy Dore's show decided either they didn't do the digging to see what the source for TFI Global was. And I also do want to say, I I could give them the benefit of the doubt and just say they saw this article from TFI Global, did no digging whatsoever, didn't check who their source was or anything. But there's also a very real possibility, and I'm leaning towards this personally because I'm not giving these people the benefit of the doubt anymore, that they saw that it was a Russian state media source, so they found a different source that covered that without being Russian state media. That is a other source that was just repeating what Russian state media was saying with no scrutiny, so they wouldn't have to say Russia Today reported this. Because if they say Russia Today reported this to their viewers, that might be even a little too on the nose for the average Jimmy Dore viewer. Now, as for all the rest of the stuff this guy was saying about, you know, the Ukrainians don't want to fight, they're surrendering en masse, there is no polling data that indicates that the vast majority of Ukrainians, or any majority of Ukrainians, want to give up the fight, want to surrender to the Russians, and want to give up their territory. I have seen no evidence of that. I would ask this man, or Jimmy, or any of the other window lickers that work at the Jimmy Dore show to provide any evidence whatsoever that the majority of Ukrainians want to give up, or the majority of Ukrainian servicemen want to give up. I've interviewed a lot of Ukrainian servicemen. I just came back from the front line of the Zaporozhye counteroffensive, was filming with artillery crews there. I went to Donetsk, 4 miles from the Russian line, from a team that the next day, the day after I left, they were shelled directly from them. I talked to them about giving up land for peace. I talked to them about negotiations, and they were steadfast. In their mind, they were saying, it's not a choice for us. People talk about negotiation and giving up land and giving up our homes. Many of the people in our squads are fighting to take back their homes they've been displaced from. They've been made refugees. And we have no option here to give that up. That's not even a choice for us. That's my experience. I have yet to meet a Ukrainian or a Russian outside of one old woman that gave me the stank eye once. She didn't even tell me this. She just gave me the stank eye, and I'm trying to like reach around to find someone who agrees with this person's perspective in this country that thinks what they think. So in my experience and the experience of any other journalist that comes here on the ground, they can't find this masses of Ukrainians who want to surrender. I can't find it in the armed forces either. And there's no polling data that indicates that. In fact, all the polling data that has been done by either Ukrainian institutes or institutes in the United States or anywhere seem to always come back that the amount of Ukrainians that want to keep up the fight exceed 80%. And when I say exceeding 80%, I'm being nice, I'm being generous, because some of it goes much higher. Definitely if you get into the specifics of the question, like, for example, trading land for peace, then you get into like 90% not wanting to surrender, not wanting to give up when they understand the conditions that might come with peace. So he's just throwing this out there because he wants the Ukrainians to feel the way he feels about the war. So that's why he's speaking for them on their behalf while not platforming Ukrainian voices. So that's the first thing. As for the second thing, that the Russians are holding back because they want to, they view the Ukrainians as their people and as their brothers. Just a week and a half ago, we were watching a Russian state media program that was pondering whether the genetic impurity of the Ukrainian people has weakened the Russian people due to resettlement campaigns during the Soviet Union when Ukrainians were moved to the Soviet, to put it lightly, to the Soviet Union. I constantly hear Solovyev saying, we need to demolish every city, block by block, room by room, wipe it off the face of the earth because the Ukrainians are so insolent to dare resist the Russians, and we need to make major Ukrainian urban centers an example so others can look upon it and see that when you resist Russia, you die. That is the narrative that is constantly being pushed on Russian state TV. And that's not just Soloveyev's program. That's the majority of their programs. When you constantly paint at people as Nazis, as degenerates, as agents of the West, agents of the globo homo, as people petitioning, and this is real, witchcraft, as people who are genetically impure, that's not going to create an army of people who are coming here to hug and love It's not creating flower children. It's creating people pumped full of hatred and anger for their enemy. That is only condensed more by their military failures and the anger that they have due to many of their buddies getting killed because of how poorly they've been led and how corruption has degraded the power of the Russian armed forces. The Russians have targeted civilian infrastructure in Kharkiv. I have filmed that myself. The Russians have targeted civilian aid workers in Kherson. I have filmed that myself. The Russians have targeted civilians in Mykolaiv. I have filmed that myself. I'm only going to be reporting just in this segment what I have seen personally and what I filmed personally, because if I was to include everything else, I could do this all day. I could talk about the 440 bodies that were uncovered in Izium. Children, men, women, only 22 of them found were military. And that's in a city of 16,000 people, many of whom fled before the Russians got there. And of the remaining ones, 440 bodies, over 440 bodies. Do we really not think that that's happening all throughout occupied territory? When you read Rusich, the neo-Nazi militia that's fighting on behalf of the Russians, and how they talk about the Ukrainian language, and how they throw slurs at them and say how disgusting they are, and how they need a quote-unquote pacification campaign, do you think that comes from a place of love? Their leader quite openly said that they are not a nationalist. Don't call me a nationalist. I am a Nazi. That's what their leader said. This is delusional. The official stance of the Russian government is, don't worry, all the Ukrainians are our people. We love them so. But that's not how that plays out on the ground. That's not what the Russian state media apparatus is pumping into its people domestically. He saw what Russia says at the UN and took it at face value. He sees what Russian state media workers say in English-speaking spaces, and he took that at face value. He didn't go see what they're saying to their own people. He didn't go see what the culture is in the Russian military, which is full of rapists, murderers, and criminals recruited directly from Russian prisons, giving a get-out-of-jail-free card if they go to Ukraine and kill people. And the culture of that military, of that violence in Russian prisons was preserved in organizations like the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin. And this is public record. This is not even a debatable thing. It's public record that Yevgeny Prigozhin said to them, this is on footage, we will keep Russian military culture. You will not have to serve when the quote-unquote untouchables in Russian prisons, those with sexual diseases, homosexuals, people who have broke Russian prison code. Do we really think if we take a bunch of gangs, pump them full of rabid nationalism, and partner them with Nazi militias and march them into Izium, that the result was going to be anything else than the mass graves that we've uncovered? When they were randomly firing at civilians in Bucha, do you think that was them expressing the love that they have for the Ukrainian people? The Jimmy Dore show is just repeating Russian state propaganda verbatim, taking the Russian government's position verbatim and running with it, with no critique or pushback, while claiming to be anti-establishment. The Jimmy Dore show is not anti-establishment. It has merely picked up the banner for a separate establishment overseas engaged in colonialism, imperialism, and ethnic cleansing.
Russia has more compassion for the Ukrainian citizens than the Americans do.
This is just comical, man. Just comical. I would like to see Jimmy Dore find Ukrainians to get on his platform and repeat this type of stuff. I would love to see that. I would love to see them platform any Ukrainians. There was a reason why the Rage Against the War Machine rally, quote unquote, didn't have any Ukrainian voices. There's a reason why that recent Code Pink event didn't have any Ukrainian voices and instead had, and I know we're going to talk about this later, instead had former Russian state media employees speaking for them instead. It's because they can't find them, because Ukrainians don't agree with them. Would they do this with any other struggle? Would they prioritize the Israeli position over the Palestinian position when talking about settlements in the West Bank and the colonialism that's going on there? Is that how they would treat that? Would they not platform Palestinian voices? Would they disregard that? Saying, oh, Americans, you know, the West doesn't, you know, is being too mean to the Palestinians by giving them any hope that they're going to get any deal. Like, this standard would not be applied in the other situations and other foreign policy issues that people like Jimmy Dore claim to care about. This is something that this is a standard that they're purely applying to Ukraine because the establishment, quote unquote, supports it. And they're just reflectively anti-establishment. It's as simple as that.
We're using them as pawns. We don't care about the blood spilled.
He doesn't care about the blood spilled either. I'm going to be blunt. I don't think this guy cares at all about anyone dying in this war. I really don't. If he did, he'd put a little bit more effort into his reporting and not literally just repeat Russian state misinformation word for word. And if there's no sources or evidence, that's how you should treat this. Look, if he reported on this story and he said, look, I do want to just put a disclaimer here. This is from RT. This is from the Russian military. So understand that there's a biased source. But he doesn't do that. He buries the lead here. This is crucial information he should have included, that Jimmy should have included. No effort.
The frequency was set up during the summer and has been actively used by over 10,000 Ukrainian servicemen who
What a ridiculous number. 10,000 Ukrainian servicemen tuned into this number and then wandered over to the Russian lines. How did they surrender? I want to hear how that happened. Did they like call them and then say, this is where we're going to meet up? And they were able to do that 10,000 times? How did this happen? This happened 10,000 times and they don't have any evidence of it. That's incredible that nobody thought to take a picture or video or document it. 10,000 times and no documentation. Incredible. And that's not to say that no Ukrainians have surrendered. Ukrainians surrendered at Azovstal after they were surrounded. Ukrainians have surrendered before and probably will surrender in the future, depending on the conditions they find out in the field, like if they get surrounded. But this is just like comical numbers. Can we just do this now? Can we just, okay. Guys, I've got a unique report right here. It was just given to me by Zelensky himself, unbiased source, that says that Putin had gay sex in a parking lot and is going to surrender tomorrow. He says he's going to give up, and he has been convinced that being gay is cool, and he is now asking for all Russians to be gay. I got this from ukrainegovernment.org, unbiased source I hope you can all trust.
Subsequently surrendered to the Russian custody. The radio frequency is operational along the entire front line. The surrendering of Ukrainian troops utilizing the Volga frequencies are reportedly well fed and received necessary medical care. Okay, this significance.
He just said okay and didn't even think about it. He didn't even think like, okay, there's no mistreatment. All of the soldiers that have come home castrated. Just that didn't happen, I guess. Can we look at Ukrainian soldiers in Russian courts? Can we just look at the pictures of Ukrainian soldiers in Russian courts? There's no pictures of them in Russian courts here, but Ukrainian POWs in court. Where is it? Let's see. I'm looking for a specific picture that I saw recently that was really something. Maybe it's on my Twitter, but where is the one I'm thinking of? There's a recent video of a Ukrainian POW that was in one of those Russian glass container courts. I don't know if you guys watch Russian court footage, but there's footage of like they take these Ukrainian soldiers and they put them on like basically show trial in this like glass cage. It's really, I don't know why they do the glass cage system in Russia or why they have glass cage. Oh, here it is. I think somebody, yeah, here it is. Well fed. He looks well fed. That well fed. Does this guy look well fed to you? Does this guy look well? This is the picture I was talking about. He looks like that looks great. This doesn't look like somebody who walked straight out of Auschwitz at all. Well fed. Let's hear it again from the Jimmy Dore Show.
Of Ukrainian troops utilizing the Volga frequencies are reportedly well fed and received necessary medical care. Okay.
Well fed. This is well fed to him. How about this? Let's have Jimmy Dore and this guy go on the same diet that Ukrainian soldiers have reported they were forced on while in captivity. And let's see them do it for a month. Because we'll see people like this after 4 or 5 months. And I'm not even saying 4 or 5 months. Just put them on it for a month. See how quick they break. See if they say they're well fed.
This significant surrendering of troops via radio communication underscores the complex dynamics and challenges faced by the Ukrainian forces and the ongoing conflict with the Russian military forces. And check this out. This is them. This is the call signal right over here. You ready?
Wait, so the evidence that's provided, and the only evidence provided is the fact that the call signal, they have audio of a call signal. That's not evidence that 10,000 people surrendered. If this is the case, if this is how we're reporting now, then that means the Ukrainians have killed 270,000 Russian soldiers. Because that's the official number that the Ukrainian government puts out. I don't report that number, at the very least uncritically, because that's the Ukrainian government statistic. And if I was to take that at face value, I'd be a shit journalist. Listening to the numbers being published by obviously biased party. I think they're correctly biased because, they're getting invaded, but a biased party in the war. And I would assume anybody else with any sense of how to be a decent journalist would feel the same way, vice versa. But there's no effort whatsoever. I think we're done. We'll play some video.
Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волга! Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волна Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волга! Волна Волга! Волга! Вызывай Волгу! Волна Волга!
At what point is this not just Russian propaganda? At what point is this not just Russian government propaganda? This is just Russian government propaganda. He is quite literally just repeating word for word Russian government propaganda completely uncritically. Look, I remember I published a story like a week or two ago. I think it was from Pravda about a Ukrainian child being hate crimed that ended up being fraudulent. And you know what we did? We took down the story. We posted an update. We said, hey, there's been an update to the story that changes the perspective on it. This obviously was not the case. Here's the update. That's the thing that you would expect anyone with 2 brain cells to do if they're being honest. Have we ever seen the Jimmy Dore show done that in relation to this war or relation to any topic whatsoever? Would you ever expect that to happen from the Jimmy Dore show?
Вызывай Волгу! Вызывай Волгу!
Нас накрыло артой. По нам работали вертушки.
Человека справа от меня снял снайпер. Нас кидают на убой.
В бой на передовую идти никто не хотел.
Все хотели сдаться.
Я хочу вернуться домой.
Я устал от этой войны.
И пришел на частоту 100.
So this is 7 people. They got 7 people in front of a camera, and that was enough for this guy to believe 10,000 people. And now we know that the Russian government has engaged in torture against POWs. We know that from returning soldiers, and we know that from just videos that they've published of them castrating soldiers out in the field. We know that they starve soldiers. And you're going to expect me to think, after I see 7 people stare into a camera and say, yeah, surrender to this Volga frequency, that's enough to translate into 10,000 soldiers surrendering through the Volga frequency. We know that the Russian government wants to promote the Volga frequency because they want more Ukrainian soldiers to surrender because they're having a hard time conquering Ukraine. And so they have a reason to promote this Volga frequency and make it think like it's a good, viable option to surrender or to get out of violence, or that, for example, you can avoid this whole war and you'll be treated perfectly well because they want more soldiers to surrender. The Germans did the same thing in World War II. They had speakers saying, we will treat you very well if you surrender immediately. But we have no quarrel. We have no quarrel with the Russian people. We only ever quarrel with Bolshevism. Sorry. I'm seeing, I hate the smell of shit. I'm starting to get sick, and this show is just covered in it. This is something that governments have done during wartime since forever. and he is just helping them do that work. That's all this is. I wouldn't expect. Look, if the Ukrainian government published surrender numbers, you shouldn't take that at face value. I'm saying that as well. Would I trust their numbers maybe more? Yeah, I think that their numbers have been like slightly more in touch with reality, but I still wouldn't take it at face value because they're an incredibly biased party, and they want to emphasize to Russian soldiers surrender, 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 surrender. Same thing goes back both ways. Is there any ending commentary from this guy? Let's hear
Different
it.
confirmed sources we've heard. Different people talking about this. Different outlets reporting in it that they've provided a way for Ukrainians to surrender because they understand what's going on.
Hey, does anybody remember that famous video where they like shot that Ukrainian guy in the head after it's the Slava Ukraini, that POW? Do you think maybe that's part of the reason why the Russian government wants to encourage people to surrender? Because when you have a lot of media like that coming out, it's going to discourage people from surrendering. Because if you get the idea that you're going to get shot in the head from surrendering, then you don't want to surrender. And the Russian government has a bad track record of doing that. So I think this is a media campaign to try to push back against, the previous actions to make it seem like, now surrendering's a good option. Everybody's doing it.
The Russians. And they understand that these people don't want to be in this war right now.
Wow. That's so deep, man. Ukrainian people have never really wanted a country. They just, they knew when they get invaded, they should just give up every time, because everybody in every country should immediately give up if they get invaded. That's truly what the people think.
So many
very deep
have died, gone to the front line, and I just thought this was really cool, something to report on right now.
And I just thought this was really cool. I just thought this was, wow, this is some top-notch reporting here. Why am I reporting this? I don't know. I just thought it was pretty cool. I thought this was a neat story.
It's something that we have to kind of point out there right now, because the fact is that our government is still fighting to keep funding this war when it's already lost. I think.
Wow. It's from the same people who said the war was never going to happen in the first place. See, this is what I mean when I talk about how much misinformation has affected the American psyche around this war. We have already seen data published showing that the more you inform Americans about the war, about how much damage has been done to Russian reserves of armor, about how much land has been retaken, over 50% of the land that the Russians have captured in this war has been retaken by the Ukrainians. The more you inform Americans about the war, the more likely they are to support it. And that's bipartisan, with Democrats, with Republicans, and when it comes to independents. All of them. Republicans actually saw the biggest jump in support, which I thought was very interesting. I think the jump was like 18 points. This is the disinformation that is being pushed in order to keep that number down, to make it seem like resisting colonialism is a lost cause, resisting imperialism, resisting Russian annexation is lost, Ukraine is lost. The Ukrainian national anthem, Ukraine is not lost. No, that's all nonsense, and it's all over. And the only way they can push that narrative that it's all over, the war's already lost, is if they have this bogus information to work off of. The war certainly hasn't been won in the sense that Crimea is going to be taken tomorrow. The war also hasn't been lost. The war is an ongoing conflict that could be changed by political machinations at home, the amount of aid that could be sent, and all sorts of factors, economic catastrophe, sanctions. There's so many different factors involved that the idea that this little dumb, knuckle-dragging, window-looking, doorknob-sucking, pencil-neck geek at all has any idea how this war is going to go is ridiculous. He has no clue how this war is going to go. He doesn't even know how to do his own job, so he certainly doesn't know how to be a general. This is not Ben Hodges, okay? This is not MacArthur. This is not Patton over here. This is General Dingleberry. Fucking moron. Oh, one last thing. If you go to the Jimmy Dore page right now, they're doing a live show actually as we speak. Can we bring it up? Jimmy Dore. Let's check it out right now. Matt Gaetz uses force of vote strategy, oust Speaker McCarthy. Zelensky signs Waffen SS flag. Zelensky signs Waffen SS flag. What is Jimmy Dore referring to? This just shows how much their show lies. I was setting up today's stream, and I saw that stream title, and I immediately knew it was bullshit. I immediately know. You want to know how I knew? First, I knew because the idea of the Jewish president of Ukraine seeing SS and signing it is ridiculous already on its face, right? But I had to follow it up. I had to check it. I couldn't just claim it was bullshit without doing the research. So I went and I found the video. I found the clip that he's referring to. Sorry, Trump, thank you so much for the tier 1. Here is the clip he was referring to. I found another person here that was covering it. Ashraf Ratasani from Going Underground, which has more than 32 million views on YouTube. Apparently a quote-unquote award-winning journalist. He's saying here, a week after Zelensky's Nazi SS Hunka given ovation by Trudeau. By the way, Zelensky didn't know this guy was going to be speaking at the event. It was the speaker of the Ukrainian parliament that brought this guy there. Zelensky was like the one guy in the crowd wasn't clapping for him, which is actually kind of funny. Given ovation by Trudeau in the entire Ukrainian parliament, Zelensky in Ukraine is presented with the emblem of the 14th SS Grenadier Division, to which Hunka belonged, that massacred thousands of Jews, Poles, and dissidents during the Holocaust. Here is the division he is referring to. Right here. This is the symbol of it, and here's the video.
Підписати нам паспорт. Да. Дуже дякую. А що не секрет?
Що ви збираєтеся робити?
Я сподіваюся, що коли я буду слідуюче звернення дивитися, то там зайде.
Anyway, he signs the flag. You can see there's a lion on it. But already, look at the symbol. There's the lion, right? Then look at this symbol. Look at this symbol. Now look at this one. Well, there's a few things you could say that's different. Number one, the lion is designed differently. Number two, there's no crowns around it. Number three, it's not shaped like this symbol. But lastly, I checked up the division. He doesn't say what division it was, so it took some digging. But I thought it was probably going to be a division from Lviv. And guess what? It was. It was a division from Lviv. It was 103rd, I believe, Territorial Defense Brigade. And their symbol is the Lviv coat of arms. The lion that they have as their symbol is the coat of arms for Lviv. And it has been the coat of arms for Lviv, or at least a symbol for Lviv, all the way back to the 14th century. Here is the seal of Lviv from the year 1359. Many European countries and nations have used lions as symbols. Ukraine is just another one. And Lviv has had the lion tied to its history for about 800, 900 years. And this symbol is the symbol of their division, of the Territorial Defense Brigade. That's all it is. He just saw a lion, did not know the history of Lviv, which, by the way, Lviv, lion, translates right there. He saw that and just ignored it. Either he ignored it or didn't know it. He either ignored it to purposefully lie, or he just doesn't know anything about the history of Ukraine because he's the knuckle-dragging, window-licker, pencil-neck geek. I don't even need to try to find Jimmy Dore's show lying about the war in Ukraine. You just kick up any live stream they're doing, and they're lying about the fucking war. Every single stream, they lie about the war. Every single stream. They take... Man, I don't know what else to say. It's infuriating. It's infuriating that hundreds of thousands of people watch this and they just accept it on face value. They don't do their own research and they trust this guy to give them a rundown of daily news. And this is just the war in Ukraine. If this is just a war in Ukraine, what else does he lie about? Does he lie about domestic American politics as well? Almost certainly so. We all remember, what was it? This isn't a lie, but this was certainly a terrible prediction. Trump would never appoint 3 Supreme Court justices, as likely as the moon falling into Lake Michigan. We all remember that. Anyway, man, unbelievably frustrating. Jimmy Dore doesn't understand Ukraine. His pencil neck geek co-host doesn't understand Ukraine. And they just repeat Russian propaganda verbatim. They might as well just do the show on RT at this point. That's all I got to say about it.